Okay, here we go. All right, well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. We've got another great show for you planned today. Really excited about having Debra Lynn Dadd on our show. I hope you're having a great day, whatever you're doing out there, whatever you find yourself up to these days. I hope that life is treating you well and all is good. So this is extremehealthradio.com. My name is Justin, and we are currently broadcasting worldwide from Southern California. So it's another day in paradise here. Thank you for joining us. We do shows 3 days a week on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And if you'd like to follow us on Facebook, feel free. It's extremehealthradio.com/Facebook. And thank you to Mike Adams of naturalnewsradio.com for having us on his show. We really appreciate that. And for reference, today is Friday, December 7th, 2012. The season is just rolling on, and my birthday in 2 days, so that'll be exciting. This is episode number 45, so you could find it at extremehealthradio.com/45, and you'll be able to find the transcription, the show notes, and anything the guest mentions you'll find on that page, so make sure to refer to that. And if you have a question for our guest, you can email that to me at justin@extremehealthradio.com, or you could call our voicemail line. Please do at 949-391-7363. And this show is brought to you by Amazon.com. If you're doing any Christmas shopping this season and would like to support us, or you could support us anytime you like just by going to extremehealthradio.com/Amazon and making your purchase that way. And before I introduce Debra Lynn Dadd to our audience, I would like to talk about our upcoming show schedule. On Monday, we've got Dr. Brian Clement from the Hippocrates Health Institute, and he does he's an author, he's a lecturer, he develops products, and he's got a great cleansing and retreat there in Florida. And also David Christopher on Wednesday, he runs the School of Natural Healing. He's an herbalist, and the school's been around since 1953, so that should be a good show. And then on Friday, we've got Professor Ron Kusan, who does a lot of work with minerals in the ocean and how to incorporate some of those minerals into our lives. So that should be a great show, so make sure to join us for that one. But today we've got Debra Lynn Dadd. I've been a fan of her work for many, many years, and she's been researching, I should say, and writing about toxic chemicals and how they affect our health for over 30 years. And New York Times calls her the Queen of Green, the Guru of Non-Toxic Living by CBS 2 TV News, the Godmother of Natural Living, and one of the country's few authorities on natural and non-toxic consumer affairs. So thank you, Debra, for joining us today. I really appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. So you are in Florida, is that right?
Yes, the other paradise.
The other paradise. How's the weather out there today?
Cloudy. I think it's going to sprinkle. But let's see, what's the temperature? It's almost 70. But that feels really cold to me because usually it's about 85.
Wow. Yeah, I was there one time in August and I just about died.
Yes. Well, I'll just tell you that 6 months of the year, it's great to live here because it's the most beautiful weather you've ever seen. It maybe gets cold one day out of the year. And last year, all the way through the year, I just wore my cutoffs and tank tops. I mean, that's just the way, and sandals. And maybe I'd put a sweater on. But then there's 6 months out of the year where it's so hot and humid that you can't leave your house. You go from one air-conditioned building into the air-conditioned car, into another air-conditioned building.
Yeah, that's how it was when I was there. It was pretty sweltering. I could barely stand it. And I went to the water in Miami, and the water was about 85 degrees too. So it wasn't.
Yes, yes. In the summertime, going in the Gulf, and I live about 10 minutes from the Gulf of Mexico, but in the summertime, going in the Gulf, it's like getting in a bathtub. It's so warm.
Oh my gosh! So you're on the West Coast then?
I'm on the West Coast, yeah.
Now, speaking of the Gulf and toxicity, have you had any experience with all of the oil that was in that area?
I didn't, because I wasn't that close to where the oil spill was, so that we didn't have like oil piled up on the beaches like further north in Florida. But we did have people like going in the water and getting rashes and things like that. So even a couple 100 miles away from where the spill was, there was an effect on the environment such that people couldn't go in the water.
Is it still that way, or is it cleaned up?
It's pretty cleaned up now. I actually haven't been in the water. I used to go down to the beach 3 or 4 times a week in the evenings in the summertime and go swim in the Gulf and walk on the sand. But I haven't done that since the spill.
Wow.
I'm kind of nervous about going back in the water.
Yeah, I can imagine. And some people are still eating the seafood out of that area too.
Yeah, I haven't been eating any local seafood either. I actually personally I'm not a big seafood fan. I never, since I was a child, have never been able to eat it without having problems. So I think that there's actually overall in the world too much toxic chemicals in seafood for my body to tolerate. So I just don't even do it at all.
Wow. What kind of experiences do you have with if you eat fish or something, do you experience the chemicals, or do you feel them or whatever?
I actually can't swallow it. It just makes me gag.
Oh, wow.
I just...
That's no good.
And it's just like across the board. Anything that comes out of the ocean or lakes or ponds or any fish, seafood, shellfish, anything, I just can't eat it. My body won't let it go down my throat.
That's funny. Wow.
And it's not an allergy. It's not like I have anaphylactic shock. It just won't go in.
That's funny. Well, I guess that's a good thing. If there's mercury in fish, you don't want to be eating that anyway.
Yeah, yeah. And I haven't suffered for having no seafood in my diet.
Yeah, I'm sure it's... So did you, as a young girl, did you want to get into this field, or how did you get into researching all of these issues? As
a young girl, this field didn't exist.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I was born in 1955, and in 1964, when I was 9 years old, Rachel Carson wrote, and it was published her book Silent Spring. And I had never read Silent Spring. It had nothing to do with me being inspired to do what I do. But I want to mention it because Silent Spring was actually the first book written about what I do, which is to identify toxic chemicals in consumer products and find safe alternatives. And in 1964, what Rachel Carson said was that her book was about pesticides, and she said that pesticides that are being applied to crops and were very toxic, and they were so toxic that she recalled, it's called Silent Spring because she recalled in her childhood that there were all kinds of birds singing in the spring, and now there were no birds singing. That these pesticides that were being used to grow our food and for all these different reasons had killed off the songbirds. And and so that was what got picked up in the consciousness of the world, was this is an environmental book. It's about songbirds being killed. Mm-hmm. But most of what Silent Spring was about, and still is about how toxic pesticides affect humans. And she wrote in that book, I don't have it sitting right in front of me or I'd read it, she wrote in that book that this is the first time in history of human beings where we are constantly exposed to toxic chemicals from the moment of our birth until the moment of our death. And in that book she said that in 1944, they already knew that toxic chemicals pervaded the entire planet and every living thing. And you may have heard a few years ago, Environmental Working Group did this study where they took the blood from umbilical cords of babies and they analyzed it and found toxic chemicals there. And at that time, I and probably everybody else went, oh my God, this is a new phenomenon. Babies are now being born toxic. But, in 1955, I was born toxic. and anybody born after 1944 or thereabouts was born toxic. We just didn't know it. Nobody was talking about it. So what happened to me was, I'll stop and take a breath because I've been talking.
No, it's okay. This is great.
What happened to me in 1978 that inspired me to get into this field is that I got very, very sick. I got sick to the point of being disabled, and I had a bizarre set of symptoms that didn't sound like any illness that I had ever heard of. I had insomnia and depression and headaches, and it was just like this list went on and on. I would faint in the shower.
Oh, wow.
And it's like, what kind of illness is this?
Yeah.
And what it turned out to be was exposure to toxic chemicals in my home. And when I first heard of this concept, which happened, I just want to tell you just for a second how I came to find this out. My mother was dying of cancer, and my father took her to the one doctor he could find that would give her intravenous vitamin C in 1978.
Oh, my gosh.
And that doctor happened to be treating people for what was called at the time environmental illness, but is now called multiple chemical sensitivities. And what this is people wonder if it's an allergy, but what it is it's a poisoning. It damages your immune system. And he saw these people being tested for different chemicals, and he said, that's what's wrong with my daughter. And he took me in, and I was tested, and of course my test results were just off the charts because my body was just tremendously overloaded with toxic chemicals.
What kind of test did he give you?
No treatment. The kind of test that they did is something called provocative neutralization testing, and I believe that's still done today.
Okay. Where
they give you a dose of chemicals and it will turn on symptoms. So, for example, if my body is sensitive to formaldehyde, then they'll give me like a little drop of formaldehyde, and whatever the specific symptom is will turn on. And that way they decide this is the set of chemicals that your body is reacting to. And at the time, what they would do is that they would determine a dose, like homeopathy, kind of. They would determine a dose, and then they'd give you that little dose in order to counteract your symptoms. So here you have people who are already overloaded by toxic chemical exposure, and now we're being given more toxic chemicals to turn off the symptoms. Now, this just did not make sense to me.
No.
Because it does, to give somebody more toxic chemicals does not reduce the toxic chemical overload. Now, in 1978, they had no name for this, but now they do. It's called body burden, and it's recognized as a source of illness by the Centers for Disease Control. In fact, the Centers for Disease Control have been monitoring the amount of toxic chemicals in people's bodies for this same 30 years that I've been writing about it. But I didn't find out they were doing that until a couple of years ago. That's how much publicity it has.
Wow.
So I was very, very sick, had all these symptoms, didn't know what to do about it, but I knew it was toxic chemicals, and so I said, well, where are these toxic chemicals? The way I'm going to get well and get out of bed is to get these toxic chemicals out of my house. Now, nobody had ever said that to me. It was just, that was the logical idea that I had. Yeah. And so I started dragging myself out of bed every morning and going down to medical libraries and the Poison Control Center and finding toxicology books in the library. And I had to go to all these different sources, and there was no internet at the time.
Yeah.
And so I had to order these books through the library system and all these kinds of things, and go to university libraries. And I started piecing together from different books what are the toxic chemicals in various products, because the most toxic products don't put their ingredients on the label, and even products that do put their ingredients on the label don't put everything. And so if you look at things like industrial manuals and stuff like that, you can find out what those toxic chemicals are. And then I have to go to another book and find out what are the symptoms.
Right.
And so I was just piecing all this together in 1978.
Because nobody was doing this kind of work.
Nobody was doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't have any of the groups. Greenpeace wasn't paying attention to it. The Environmental Working Group didn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
All the groups that we rely on now for toxics information didn't exist.
Gee, so you had to go to one place to get what the actual chemicals were, and then you had to go to another place to find out what the symptoms of those were.
Yes.
Wow.
And so then I pieced them all together. And I was the first person to do that. I was the first person to write about toxic chemicals in consumer products. And now people are talking about legislation and right to know and all those things. But in 1978, nobody was talking about anything except I had this idea lying in bed that I wouldn't be sick if I was not exposed to toxic chemicals. And I was right, because once I started finding out about these things, I said, okay, there's toxic chemicals in perfume, so I'm going to stop wearing my perfume, and instantly I didn't have any more headaches. And then I found out that in tap water, and this was very, very new information then, they were just starting to study this. In tap water, when it comes out of the tap, if it has been purified with chlorine, and there's any kind of organic matter like dead leaves or something in the water supply, it will turn into something called chloramines, and one of those chloramines is chloroform. Now, we know chloroform as that thing, that toxic chemical that if you want to knock somebody out, like in the old movies, they pour chloroform on a rag and hold it over their face, and the person's out. Well, I was standing there every morning taking a shower in this little tiny cubicle of a shower space with all this chloroform coming out of my shower head. And it's no wonder that I was feeling faint.
Wow.
And so now you can buy shower heads all over the internet now, but there were no shower heads then because, shower filters. There were no shower filters then because nobody knew the chloroform was coming out of the shower head.
Yeah.
So I said to my father, I can't take a shower because there's chloroform coming out of this shower and I faint. And he went down to the hardware store, took me down to the hardware store, rigged up a ugly but useful filter that we could put on the shower head. We had to change the fittings and everything from under sink model. And the first day that I took a shower with this filter, I didn't faint. And I'm going, wait, this is all making sense now. I'm just like one by one eliminating chemicals and my symptoms are going away immediately.
Wow, that's just crazy. We are with Debra Lynn Dadd. We have to take a short break, but I want to continue this. This is fascinating how you had such an immediate response to the cleansing out of the chemicals. So her website is DLD123, Debra Lynn Dadd. So it's DLD123.com. She is the author of Toxic Free and Home Safe Home. And we'll be right back after this break. I do a lot of weightlifting and lifting heavy weights at the gym, and I love it. But there's also another side to working out, which actually helps you increase the energy in your body. As you know, in our culture, just about everything is a stress to our body. It depletes us of life force energy and our energy in general, whether it's, coworkers or getting to work or dealing with difficult family members, things like that. All of these things cause stress and energy depletion in our body. And something like Qigong is a really great way to help cultivate your inner energy. And it's been practiced by people in the East for thousands of years. It's put together by Tristan Truscott and Peter Ragnar. You can find it at extremehealthradio.com/Qigong, which is Qigong. And it's called Good Morning, Good Evening Qigong. And I highly recommend getting this product. It comes as a physical product to your house with really great DVDs and workbooks on how to do this ancient art of cultivating your inner energy and building that core energy of your body. And it's been practiced, like I said, for thousands of years. So I highly, highly recommend checking it out. If nothing else, just go to extremehealthradio.com/Qigong, Qigong, and get on their mailing list because they'll send you lots of free information as well. So check out Peter Ragnar. He looks amazing for how old he is. He's been doing this for like 60 years or something. It's really an amazing product. So check it out, extremehealthradio.com/Qigong. All right, we are with Debra Lynn Dadd. And Debra, was that the right website to give for you, dld123.com?
Yes, that will get people there.
Okay, yeah, because it's also DebraLynnDadd.com, but some people...
Yeah, but it's easier to remember dld123.com.
Yeah, definitely. So you were talking about your exposures to the chloroform gases in your shower, and what an amazing thing to have such a quick response like you did.
Yes, well, one of the things that I find out, I've studied a lot of toxicology in the past 30 years, and one of the things that I found out is in the field of toxicology, or in the field of poisoning, which is all the same thing, if you were to call a poison control center and say, help, my child just swallowed drain cleaner or something. No, let's say it's something else, not a swallowing. I came in and opened a bottle of window cleaner and I'm having a headache. If you were to call a poison control center, then what they would say is, number one, get away from the poison. And this is just like the number one thing. The number one rule is if you're having a poisoning, get the person away from the poison, because your body will respond to the presence of the poison. And we're going to talk about something else a little later, I think, where it's going to be really important to remember this, and I'll remind you of this again. So I thought, knowing that, it was like later, it was like my instincts had kicked in and said, get away from this stuff that is making you sick. But that also happens to be the number one rule in toxicology, is if you're being poisoned, number one, get away from the poison. Number two, you take a shower, get fresh air, all those kinds of things.
Right.
But number one is get yourself away from the poison. So that was exactly the right thing. I couldn't leave my house to get away from the poison, so I had to take the poison out of my house. There's actually two kinds of toxic exposures. One is called acute and the other is chronic. Acute poisoning is if you drank a bottle of gasoline or drain cleaner or something like that, where there's an immediate effect, and it's usually pretty bad. And so you call the poison control center and they say drink milk or go get your stomach pumped or something like that. And that's one kind of poison, and usually those are labeled keep out of reach of children. Okay. Which nobody pays attention to, but they at least have a label or a skull or crossbones or something. Right. The chronic poisons are something like, I'm going to use cigarettes for an example, because the first time you smoke a cigarette, I've never smoked cigarettes, but I've observed this. When the first time you smoke a cigarette, your body coughs, and you don't. It doesn't like it, but you just kind of persevere and you keep smoking and you get accustomed to it, and then you have whatever nice effect cigarettes have, but you don't particularly notice that it's any problem the first few packs or the first few years. But then as time goes on, then 30 years later, you develop cancer. Now, that's called a chronic poison, where you need to be exposed to it day in, day out, over a period of time. You are exposed to small amounts. And this is what our homes are filled with, is a whole lot of chronic poison. Yeah. And there are things like cleaning products, pesticides, finishes on clothing, fluoride in toothpaste. All these things that everybody's using every day that they think are safe are all these little poison exposures that eventually build up to all kinds of illnesses.
Should people be concerned if they live in a place, just an average, normal American house, apartment, or whatever, and they feel relatively healthy, but should they still take notice because there are things that can be affecting them and they don't even know it, sort of like the cigarettes that you were just talking about?
Yes, absolutely. And I know that one thing that I've observed is that people aren't always concerned so much about preventing a danger as they're concerned about doing something to improve a problem that has already occurred. Right. But one of the reasons why I'm here on the radio today is because once I got to the point where I saw not only that my symptoms would stop if I stopped being exposed, but then as time went on, I thought, well, wait a minute, I didn't even have to have this illness in the first place,
Right.
because it's entirely preventable. That I didn't need to have all those hours away from enjoying my life, or all those days and weeks and months away from earning income, or any of those things that I had lost for a period of time because I had been poisoned. That I didn't have to go through that experience because it's entirely preventable. So as far as I'm concerned, you shouldn't wait until you have symptoms. We should just all be recognizing that we live in a toxic world that is making us sick, that will result in cancer and birth defects and all kinds of things in the future.
Mm-hmm.
It will happen. And you can see that all these illnesses, I mean, exposure to toxic chemicals has now been related to diabetes and infertility and overweight and even lack of sex drive. So people, for example, don't need to take Viagra. What they need to do is get the toxic chemicals out of their house.
Right.
They don't realize that being impotent is a symptom of toxic exposure.
Wow. So what are some of the other symptoms that people might have from being exposed to these things? Maybe they're, some people may be listening and they're completely healthy and they don't have any of these issues, but like we're saying, we should really take a preventative approach. But some other people might be dealing with lots of different health crises and health issues and may not pin it back to this. So what are like a list of a lot of the symptoms that could happen from being exposed to these types of chemicals?
How many years do you have to listen to this list? I just, when I was first diagnosed with this immune system problem 30 years ago, people really had very little awareness of toxic chemicals and their health effects. And so there was either poisons, immediate poisons that the Poison Control Center dealt with, or there was this strange group of people who had this immune system malfunction because of exposure to toxic chemicals. And that was about it for recognized. But we have come a long way in the past 30 years. Mm-hmm. And when I was researching my latest book, Toxic Free, I did a whole new research about what are the connections between toxic chemicals and health. And here's what I found.
Yeah.
Every single body system is affected by toxic chemical exposure. There is virtually not a single illness or symptom that you could have that is not related to toxic chemical exposure.
Wow.
So the question is not what's the list of symptoms. The question is, are there any that are not related to toxic chemical exposure? And that is, the answer to that is no. There was a study done a couple of years ago where they reviewed something like 1,200 studies, and they found that 75% of all healthcare costs are related to illness caused by toxic chemical exposure.
Did you say 70?
That's a huge amount. 75%.
75%. That's amazing.
It is amazing. It is amazing. It's billions of dollars. I don't remember. I calculated out how many billions of dollars it is. But we have a problem in this country with healthcare costs, and at the same time, we're being poisoned. So you can do the math and see that if we would remove toxic poisons from our homes, then we wouldn't have to pay so much in healthcare costs.
Now, do you think that they're just not telling us that these things are poisonous because it would cost more money to make higher quality items, or do you think there's more going on?
Well, I'm not particularly a conspiracy theorist, but some people have suggested that our products are laced with toxic chemicals so that we have to spend money on drugs.
Yeah. Well, it could be.
And, but I look at it in a different way. I think that we have free choice in the world, and that we have the freedom to do the research and find the products. Actually, it's not such a big deal to even do the research anymore because I've done it all. You can just go to my website, look at the products that don't have toxic chemicals, and buy those.
Yeah, it's that easy, isn't it?
It really is that easy. That we have a lot of choices now that we didn't have in 1978 when I started working on this. But now you can just choose the non-toxic things, and very soon your health problems will start to decrease, whatever it is they are. Removing toxic chemicals will help.
Right. So now, with the things that are in people's houses, What are some of the most toxic things that are inside just the average American house, do you think?
Cleaning products and pesticides are right up there.
Okay.
Fire retardants, and there was just an article in the news last week about fire retardants in couches, and fire retardants are pretty toxic. But the most surprising thing, I want to talk about beds for a minute, because actually, if you have carpet in your house, you should take out your carpet because that's really toxic.
Really?
But I think the major exposure that most people have is right in their beds, because, number one, almost every sheet and pillowcase that there is treated with a formaldehyde-based finish to make it wrinkle-free or permanent press. And guess what one of the major symptoms associated with formaldehyde is, besides the fact that it's carcinogenic?
Maybe depression or lack of being able to sleep or insomnia or something.
You're right, insomnia.
Gosh, wow.
And it blew me away when I read that, and because insomnia was one of my symptoms, and I went, oh my God, formaldehyde causes insomnia. There's insomnia in the permanent press on my bed sheets. I went right home and ripped those sheets off my bed, and it was the first night I slept.
Why are they putting formaldehyde on the bed sheets?
Because that's what's used to make resin, which makes the cotton permanent press so that you don't have to iron it.
Oh, man. Golly.
So any no iron cotton sheets, any polyester cotton sheets, all have formaldehyde finishes on them. If you want sheets with no formaldehyde finishes on them, cotton flannel has no finish, cotton knit has no finish, and there are some regular sheets that they haven't, sheets that will wrinkle, and you need to iron them if you don't want them to wrinkle, but they do exist. You can buy them.
That's amazing. I like to start with places where you spend the most time, and I think that making
that's exactly it.
Yeah, making sure you have a good working environment, like your computer and then your bed, because that's 16 hours a day right there.
It is, and that really is where I started. At the point when I figured all this out, I was living in a condominium that had just been remodeled, and it had new paint, new vinyl shelf paper. I had just put a bunch of toxic wood finish on a wall, a wood-paneled wall. There was just a lot of toxic stuff there, but I just started with my bedroom, and the first thing that I did was I ripped out the carpet, and I just had a cement floor. I didn't know what to put there instead, but I wanted to get the toxic stuff out. And then I got rid of my whole bed, because mattresses are made from... First I got rid of the sheets, but then the next step was to get rid of the bed, because mattresses are made from polyurethane foam, most of them, and the polyurethane foam is made from a pretty toxic chemical called toluene diisocyanate. But it also breaks down into an even more toxic chemical. And and then on top of it, they put fire retardants. And so one of the most toxic things that you're going to be exposed to in your house day in and day out, or I should say night in and night out, is you spend this 8 hours on a toxic bed.
Wow. And
if people would just change their beds, then that would reduce a lot of the exposure just right there, that one thing.
Because they're outgassing all night long, right?
They're outgassing all night long.
Wow. So are the memory foam mattresses, are those worse than regular beds?
Memory foam mattresses actually are made of the same material as a regular bed. They're all made from polyurethane foam unless you specifically get something else. You can go to my website. There's a section on my website called Debra's List, and it's a directory of hundreds of websites that sell non-toxic products. And there's a whole list of a couple dozen websites that sell completely natural beds and bedding with no toxic chemicals in them. All these products exist. It's just a matter of people becoming aware that there's a problem with toxic chemical exposure and then making a decision that they're going to reduce their exposure.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. And, I think it's important for people to spend the extra money and support these companies, because imagine if there was a list of all of these toxic things that we have in our lives, but so we can get rid of all of them, but then you walk into a house and you don't have a bed, you don't have a couch, you don't have anything in your house because there's no alternatives.
Well, there are alternatives. I mean, that's the point. That's actually the point of my work. I'm not here to tell people that the world is toxic. I mean, there are some people where that is their message,
right,
that everything's toxic and we need to get these businesses to change their tune and all that. I think it's great that they're all doing that. But my point is we don't have to wait for government to change the laws. We don't need to wait for multinational corporations to change their formula because all these products exist right now. And what my work is about is showing you where these products are and how to choose them. Now, there's another aspect to this that I want to make sure that we have time to talk about, so I'm going to bring it up right now.
Actually, we need to take a quick break. It'll only be about a minute and a half, but we got to take a quick break, and then we'll get right back into that. We are with Debra Lynn Dadd. Her website, again, check it out. It's dld123.com. She's the author of Toxic Free and Home, Safe Home. So we will be right back after this quick break. Hey guys, hopefully you're enjoying the interview so far. I've been so hot on rebounding lately, and I just love it. I do it at the gym, and people just look at me crazy, but rebounding is one of the most healthy exercises you could ever do. It tones and works out every muscle in your body, even your eyes, and every cell in the body is exercised by the up and down motion of jumping on a mini trampoline. And we feel like we've got the best rebounder on the market. It's called the Bellicon. You can find it at extremehealthradio.com/Bellicon. It is got a 5-year warranty on the frame and mat, and there's a 10-day money-back guarantee, so you can just ship it back if you don't like it. But it's really the Rolls-Royce of rebounding, and if you listen to any of the health experts, it's the best way to detoxify your lymphatic system. And your lymphatic system is responsible for, among many things, but it stores poisons and toxins in your body, and it's one of the best exercises that you can do to drain your lymphatic system. And a lot of people do it if they have cancer. They'll rebound with oxygen, and it's one of the most therapeutic and best exercises you could ever do. It works out every single muscle in your body, every single cell in your body. It's just phenomenal. So check it out at extremehealthradio.com/Bellicon. All right, we're having a lot of fun with Debra Lynn Dadd. Her website is dld123.com. So sorry, Debra, to cut you off like that, but I wanted to get that break over so we have a nice long segment at the end. And so, what were you going to bring up at the very last point there?
Well, the other thing that I discovered just recently when I was working on my book, Toxic Free, is that for all these years, I was telling people just reduce toxic chemicals in your home and in your work environment, and your body will heal itself, because our bodies have a natural healing mechanism. And what the toxic chemicals are doing is suppressing that. So you remove the toxic chemicals and then your body can heal. And that's a true statement, and I went from being disabled to being functional by doing that. And then a couple of years ago, I started doing things to remove toxic chemicals from my body. And oh my God, did that make a difference.
Really?
And so much so that I, in my last book, instead of just being about toxic exposures, half of it is about removing toxic exposures, and half of it is about removing toxic chemicals from your body. It's that important, because remember back at the beginning of the show I said the number one thing is to get the person's body away from the toxic chemical.
Right.
If you're carrying it around in your body, you can't get away from it.
That makes sense. It almost seems like getting rid of all the toxic chemicals in your life as much as you can is going to get you back up to kind of baseline, kind of level zero. But then you've still got to deal with what you've already been exposed to for the past 20 years.
Right.
Okay.
That's exactly right. And this is where this concept of body burden comes up, because what happens is that our bodies are exposed to toxic chemicals, and we have a detoxification process in our body where we can deal with natural toxic things, but then there are these man-made toxic chemicals And our bodies can even deal with a certain amount of those, like they can be processed and broken down by the liver. But the problem is there's way too many of them. And we're just exposed to millions and millions and millions of tons of toxic chemicals throughout our lives. And there's something like 80,000 different toxic chemicals in consumer products.
80,000. Do you know how many toxic chemicals are introduced, new ones each year?
You know, in my book, I don't have it right in front of me, but in my book, I give a website and I don't even remember what it's called at the moment, but there's a website, but it is in my book. There's a website you can go to, which is an agency that approves the new toxic chemicals. And it has one of those little counters, and so you can just watch the numbers go by. Like every few seconds, there's another toxic chemical that's approved. Oh,
my golly, that's crazy.
And the number is in the millions. Yeah. It's in the millions, really.
Wow.
And it is crazy. It is crazy. So the thing is that we need to it's really, if we want to be healthy, I really consider this to be the number one health problem there is. Because you can take herbs, you can take supplements, you can exercise, all these things. But if you're still being exposed to toxic chemicals, if there's still toxic chemicals in your body, they're going to be affecting your health. And this is the first thing to handle. And a lot of doctors are saying that now, that it's being more and more recognized that detox is the number one thing to do.
Yeah.
But detox, there's a lot of talk about detox, and you need to do things to detox that are very specific that will detox toxic chemicals. We're not just talking about getting, food waste out of your body or metabolic waste. We're talking about getting toxic stuff out, man-made chemicals, and there are specific ways to do that. And that's the next thing.
Yeah, it makes sense, because if you're sitting against the wall, banging your head against the wall, complaining about a headache, it's great to take herbs maybe that will help get rid of the headache, but all the while you're still banging your head against the wall.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So I'd like to tell our listeners some things that they can do in order to get toxic chemicals out of their bodies.
Okay, let's talk about a handful of them that you think are good.
Okay, so the first one is very simple, is to just drink more water. Because water is the way that things get flushed out of your body. So that's number one. And it should be clean water, not water with chlorine and fluoride in it. You can, again, go on my website, Debra's List, and I have a section that lists water filters that I've found to be good ones.
Good. I was going to ask you about that. Okay.
And the next thing is that people really need to be getting good nutrition. They need to be eating whole organic foods, taking whole food supplements, and not be eating junk food, because your body needs nutrition to detox. Okay. So that is very, very important. Another thing and this is the thing that really, really made a difference for me, there's a fairly new product out called Liquid Zeolite. It's a type of product. There's several different brands. Some are better than others. But what Liquid Zeolite does is that it acts like a magnet. It's just a naturally occurring volcanic mineral. It acts like a magnet, and you put some drops in water and you drink it. It goes into your bloodstream, and it will pull the toxic substances out of your blood in 4 to 6 hours, and then just get excreted. And right there, you have just removed some toxic chemicals. So
can you take some of those and then do a blood test kind of thing? And
you can. You can take it. You can take a before blood test, and then take it for a month or so, and usually takes like 3 or 4 months to handle a past amount of toxic chemicals. You take it, and then you can take a blood test at the end, and it will show that substances have been removed.
Wow. We offer Vitality Herbs and Clay on our website, Michael King, and he puts out some great products for some clays. Are clays some good ways to do that, or do they not work on the...
Clay is a good way to do that, but what happens with clay is that it basically goes into your intestines and will clean out your intestines, which need to be cleaned out. But the difference with liquid zeolite is that it will, and especially if you get the right ones, they will go into your bloodstream and even down into capillary level and take the toxic chemicals out of your cells.
Whoa. So can you buy these at certain places that you have recommended, or?
I have, when you go to my website, in fact, there's a page set up specifically for this. You can go to toxicfree123.com, and it'll just take you right there to talk, and it talks about zeolite. You can't buy it in a store, but you can buy it online. You can buy it on my website. In fact, you could put it on your website, Justin, and people could buy it from you.
Interesting. Yeah, those types of products are fascinating to me. There was one a few years back called OSR, which was, I'm sure you might be familiar with it, Oxidative Stress Relief, and by Boyd Haley. And that was an amazing product. I think it helped increase the glutathione levels in your body to help your body get rid of these things. And then after a while,
but let me explain the difference between this and a product like what you've just described. There's two ways to help your body detox toxic chemicals. One is to strengthen the detox organs, and the other one is to remove it directly. Okay. Now, liquid zeolite will remove the products directly. Your liver could be completely shot. You could be on your deathbed and have none of your detox organs working. As long as your kidneys work to some degree, you can take liquid zeolite and it will detox. It will remove toxic chemicals from your body because it's direct. The zeolite goes in your body, it absorbs the chemicals, and it removes them.
That is so great.
You can improve the glutathione levels in your body, but then what needs to happen is, and I'm not saying that people shouldn't do this, okay? But here I just want you to understand the difference. So you improve the glutathione levels. Glutathione is needed in order for the liver to be able to process a toxic chemical and remove it from your body. But the liver still needs to go through that process. And once it processes it, it needs to send that processed chemical now through your gut. And if your gut is not functioning, if you're constipated or, leaky bowel syndrome or, all those things, if your gut is not in good condition, those toxic chemicals are going to go right back into your body.
Wow.
So in order to, there really is a whole program that I've outlined in my book in detail of how detoxification works for chemicals, different things that you can do. But I bring up liquid zeolite because it's fast. It's something that everybody can do right now. It doesn't matter. You don't have to wait for your liver to get back into condition. You can just start taking these drops and the toxic chemicals will be out of your body.
That's great.
And that's why I think it's so amazing. I have had amazing experiences myself with this. One of my readers wrote to me and said that she gave it to her father who was bedridden, and in 5 days he got up out of bed and announced that he was going to go to the donut shop.
That is so great. Wow. So that you can check it out at toxicfree123.com. Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, that is so great. And so the zeolites, is it a costly thing? And how long does each bottle last? And
it's not costly. There are some that are costly, but the one that I recommend, it costs, if you get the discount plan, it's $25 a month for a month's supply. That's something. I just am going to take it for the rest of my life because I'm always being exposed to toxic chemicals, even though I live in a very toxic-free home. Uh-huh. I go outside and there's pesticides and car exhaust and perfume and all those things get in my body. And so by continuing to take liquid zeolite, anything that's coming into my body, I'm assisting it in going out right away. And $25 a month, I mean, you can't buy coffee every day for $25 a month.
And do you just put a couple drops in? Do you do it a couple times a day, or what's the protocol?
I think that it's 3 drops 3 times a day. Okay. I don't always take the recommended dose. I take what I think my body needs.
Okay.
You can take more than the recommended dose. I mean, it's not going to do anything to hurt you. It's just a little tiny molecule of a natural mineral. There's nothing toxic about it. It's on the USDA generally recognized as safe list. It's really pretty amazing.
Wow. Okay, so we got the water, the nutrition, and the zeolites. What else do you think are...
Here's another thing, is exercise. And exercise is important because there are 2 systems in the body that work together. One is the blood, and the blood brings nutrients to all your cells and tissues and organs. And then there's the lymph, and the lymph carries away all the garbage, all the metabolic waste and whatever else needs to be taken away. And the blood is pumped by the heart, so the blood is always circulating. The lymph has no pump, and so the only way it moves is when you move your body. So the more you exercise, the more your lymph is going to move and get those toxic things out of your body, whatever those toxic things happen to be. And the other benefit of exercising, too, is that you can release toxic chemicals through sweat. Uh-huh. And so when you build up a sweat from your exercise, that's actually helping your body release toxic chemicals. You could go sit in a sauna or do a steam room or go outside in Florida for 6 months of the year.
That's right.
And sweat. But you could also exercise.
Yeah.
And one more thing that I want to mention that is things that anyone can do is eat more greens, because the chlorophyll in leafy green vegetables helps your body remove toxic chemicals.
Wow, chlorophyll. So, yeah, we have a Bellicon rebounder. Do you recommend rebounding for that reason?
I do, and I do it myself.
Yeah, it's a great thing, isn't it? It's unlike any other exercise, isn't it?
Well, it is, and it's particularly good for lymph, for the lymph system. So
yeah, it's great for bone density and all kinds of great things. Mm-hmm. So now with the housings, would you recommend people just get rid of their carpet, or are there green carpets out there that are helpful for people?
There are a few green carpets, but my best recommendation is to eliminate carpet altogether, and I'll tell you why. Carpets tend to accumulate dust and dirt and molds. And when I was moving into the house that I lived in before this one, though, in California, I had the pest inspector come. You know, they always have to do a pest inspection and make sure that there's no pests before you buy a house. And so the inspector came, did the pest inspection, gave the house a clean bill of health, and then I moved in and started ripping out the carpets. And as I did, all these carpenter ants started running all over the place, and there was all these carpenter ants living under my carpets. Oh, wow. And nobody ever saw them, but they were eating my floor.
Jeez, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. So there's mold that can be trapped in carpets, as well as they're probably sprayed with some kind of chemicals as well, right?
Oh, there's hundreds of toxic chemicals in carpets. But we were talking about even if you had a green carpet that didn't have toxic chemicals, there's still these other problems with it, that they can have mold and dust and dirt, and then you have to clean them in some way, and there's toxic chemicals in the carpet cleaner. And it's just, if you have, say, a wood floor or a tile floor, it just is much more hygienic.
Yeah, it's much easier. So do you have lots of, I'm sure you probably don't, plastic in your house? At some point you can't completely get rid of all plastic, but have you been moving away from plastic, I'm sure?
I have totally been moving away from plastic, and yes, you cannot get rid of all plastic, but there are different kinds of plastics. Some are more toxic and some are less toxic, and that's one of the things that I write about as well, is being able to identify the least toxic things regardless of what they're made from.
Wow. So in your book, do you mention, because I mean, if you think about the toxins that are in our lives, I mean, like you said, I think there's 80,000 of them, and they're just everywhere in our cookware, our Tupperware.
Yes.
In your book, do you mention, I'm sure you talk about all of this stuff.
I talk about as much as I could talk about in the number of pages I had to write about. In my book, I give you 50 simple things that you can do to remove toxic chemicals from your home, but I write about many more of them on my website, and people can also call me for consultations. I can go anywhere in the world and come look at your house and tell you what's toxic about it and what to do to fix it.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. So you can also help people through Skype or things like that as well?
Yes.
Wow. Golly. So, I mean, if you think about it, if you think about hairsprays, makeup, soaps, toothpaste, smoke from the cars and paints on your wall, perfumes. I mean, it's like, you can avoid it, but it's just amazing how just walking outside, you're exposed to stuff.
Well, that's the thing. I don't want people to think that just because it's toxic outside that why do anything indoors? Mm-hmm. Because indoors you really can make a significant difference in your exposure by paying attention to your home and workplace environment. Because the chemicals tend to concentrate more concentratedly indoors because they're not being diluted by all the air, and then if you're running air conditioning like I do, or central heat in the winter and other places, the same air is recirculating. It's not bringing fresh air in from the outside. Most people don't know that about central ventilation systems, that they just keep recirculating the same air. So you just, you open a bottle of toxic cleaning product and it goes into the air and it's still there, recirculating, and then next week you open it again and you clean with a toxic cleaning product and now there's twice as much. It's not going anywhere. And so this is why it's so important to pay attention to your toxic exposures at home, because you can reduce them to a point where you can have significant improvement in your health.
What I love about your work, too, is that you talk a lot about, obviously, the toxins that are there, but then you give so many resources for alternatives that people can get into. And I love that zeolite thing because it's so easy to be able to just throw in a couple drops to some water. I mean, how easy is that,
Yeah, it is easy. There's so many, it's not like that I had never heard of detox before, but, you have all those drinks that taste terrible, and
yeah,
and this is the easiest detox you've ever seen.
Yeah, my wife is a hairstylist, and you can imagine the amount of chemicals she's exposed to on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. So that would be a great thing to go to toxicfree123.com. That's amazing. And then we didn't even get to the toxins in foods. I mean, geez, there's loaded in there too.
Well, I could come again,
yes.
And we'll keep talking.
I would love that because there's a lot of topics that we didn't cover, so that would be great. So on your website, do you do a blog every day or every week? How does that work?
There are many parts to my website. One of the most popular is my Green Living Q&A blog, which people write in, and then I answer their questions. And also my readers answer the questions. And so there's a lot of good information. I have over 3,000 questions on there, over 12,000 answers. So pretty much anything that has to do with any aspect of toxicity, you may be able to find there. I also am about to launch a food blog where the whole thing is just going to be about food and where the toxic chemicals are in food and how you can eat a toxic-free diet. And some foods themselves are toxic. Yeah. I mean, just forget about the chemicals. The foods themselves are toxic. And so we're going to talk about all of that. And of course, I have Debra's list, and I do consultations. And you should just go to my website and look at everything.
Wow, that's great. So that's DLD123.com for listeners to make it easy. And your book, Toxic Free, is available. Is that on Amazon?
It's on Amazon, yes.
Excellent. Okay, well, thank you for being on our show. I really appreciate your time and your energy today, Debra. That was great.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. Would you mind holding as I close out the show?
I'll be here.
Okay, excellent. All right, thank you, everybody, for joining us today on another edition. Wow, that was quite the eye-opener interview, and Debra's got so many good things to say. Check her out at DLD123.com. And if you found value in this show, would you do me a favor and click like on the show page? That would be really helpful for us. That's extremehealthradio.com/45. And thank you again to Mr. Mike Adams of naturalnewsradio.com. And if you like, you can sign up to our mailing list. We've got a lot of great subscribers and great content coming out of that, so feel free to do that and follow us on Facebook. And also, we are 100% listener supported, so thank you for your donations recently. It's such a huge help to make sure we can pay all our bills here and keep providing this kind of content for you. So thank you for your donations. It's very much appreciated. If you can't donate, don't worry about it. You can just pass our site on to your friends and follow us